Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. Quick reminder, next week is Diarrhea Awareness Week. It runs Monday through Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at Fighters of Europe from Capsicum Games, Don't Panic Games, and Ares Games. In Fighters of Europe, two players take on the roles of either the RAF or the Luftwaffe as they battle for supremacy in the skies above Britain in World War II. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the sequel to Fighters Over the Pacific. I did a review of that a few years ago. This game has a lot of the same core mechanics. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds about the rules, but I'm just going to give you a basic rules overview and then tell you what I think. You have Luftwaffe and RAF planes, fighters and bombers, as they attempt to do battle over southern England. Now, what you're doing here each round is you're setting up a scenario, and the scenario is going to have kind of planes in contiguous formations. Now, that's important because essentially you want to keep your fighters in formation for as long as you can because that will give you the greater initiative. Essentially, each round you are looking at how many planes you have that are in a contiguous formation at the same elevation. Now, if they're got a white background, it means they are at higher elevation. If they are in the colored background, they are at lower elevation. So if you've got all your planes together at the same elevation, you essentially are forming kind of one group, and that's a good thing. If you have two groups or three groups, obviously it begins to add up. Now, the higher number you get for how many groups you have is a bad thing because the person with the lower number of groups, they go ahead, they get initiative, and they can decide who is going first and who's going to go second during that game round. Now, what you're going to do over the course of a round is alternate activating these groups. Now, you've got player aids that essentially tell you kind of what your movement point is, what your firing arc is. Essentially, you can do different maneuvers. You can turn left, you can turn right, but not on the same turn. You can kind of slip into the different hexes in front of you. You can dive, flipping your high altitude to low altitude, or climb. And you're going to, of course, spend different amounts of movement points in these different maneuvers. But what you're doing is you're attempting to maneuver yourself into a firing position on your enemy's planes. And as you're flying around maneuvering yourself into these positions, you are aware, of course, that your enemy may be able to get a firing solution on you as well. So as you are maneuvering to this position, if you fire on a plane, if you're firing into a space where a plane is, and simply meaning that puts them in your line of sight in your firing arc, if that plane is not already activated, they can go ahead and move. They can take their turn to move, and then they got to place a marker on there to show that they've already activated. They can't activate that unit again this round. And that can actually lead to a cascade of movements and attacking, and you just keep moving, playing off each other like that. But you go ahead and you activate all your planes in such a way. Now, if you have a plane in your arc and it has already moved and it can't maneuver, can't escape, you can go ahead and do one hit point to it. A lot of the times that means you're going to put kind of a wounded marker under it, which is the smoke trailing behind it. Some of I think the Luftwaffe planes have the kind of double machine guns, so they can actually, the cannons, so they can actually take out a plane just with one hit. But you're going around and you're actually hitting the different planes in the sky, trying to take out your opponent. So every plane of your opponents that you take down, you gain points, and you're placing them kind of on a trophy point area there that you have a trophy point board. And so what's going to happen is if ever you completely eliminate your enemy's planes, then obviously you win. Otherwise, you're going to look at the timer on the scenario. When you reach the end of the timer of the scenario, whoever has the most points from kills wins. Fighters of Europe. We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review. All right, Fighters over Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, I was a big fan of Fighters over Pacific. In fact, I remember the very first time I even heard about that game, Fighters over Pacific, I was in Honolulu, so that was pretty cool. But I was excited about that game, and shortly thereafter, the good people at Ares Games actually sent me a copy of Fighters over Pacific, and I loved it. I thought it was just this great. It almost was like a chess match, and it would almost be abstracted, except the theme is very heavy here in the different kinds of planes and the maneuvers and all sorts of things. So I really, really enjoyed Fighters over Pacific. And I was excited to learn that they were coming out here with Fighters of Europe as well. It was kind of fun playing the U.S. Army and the U.S. Naval Air Force and the Japanese, and then here you're playing the RAF and the Luftwaffe. So this is another great epic contest of World War II here in this game. Now, the game is very similar to Fighters over Europe. In a lot of respects, it plays very similarly. Your planes move and act in a very similar way. You do have the scenarios are different. They've mixed up the scenarios a bit. You do have some kind of in some areas you're going for kind of land targets and stuff like that, and so the scenarios mix things up, right? And they keep this from being just kind of the same game with a different theme. There is some difference here. Now I got to tell you, I love this game. I love the theme. I love the artwork. I love the gameplay. The gameplay here is just so much fun. I just think it's wonderful kind of World War II dogfighting that, again, it has a real chess-like feel to it as you are trying to maneuver your planes into the best possible way to get the attacks and not get attacked themselves. And just like chess, you have to think 2 or 3 moves ahead. Well, if I go attack him here and he moves, is he going to go ahead and get my plane? But if he does that, then I can maneuver my plane to go after that plane. So there's a lot of that same kind of strategic thinking in this game that you get from chess, and I really, really like that quite a bit. Now, my only real complaint about the game is, you've got, for instance, the RAF, they've got the Hurricanes and the Spitfires. And it's hard to tell with my old eyes just off the bat what they are. And they've got writing on there that says what they are. But man alive, you have to hold that right up to your eye to see it. I just can't see that well. And I wish maybe there was some way they just had an H or an S in a big letter on there just so you could tell right off the bat what it was. I would have appreciated that. It is what it is. Like I say, a very, very minor complaint in what I think is just an absolutely excellent game. Now, the question is, if you've got Fighters over Pacific, do you need Fighters of Europe? And, I mean, I guess no, you don't need it. But you want it because, like I say, you do have some of these fun new planes, you do have the new scenarios, and I think it does mix it up enough that it does feel like it's a different game. Some really fun stuff going on in this one that I like quite a bit. On the Cody scale, I'm going to give Fighters of Europe an 8 out of 10. It was just a lot of fun. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we'd ask you to please leave a comment for us here on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on Facebook, on X. We'd love to hear from you, and please subscribe to all of our social media outlets. I'd ask you to go ahead and give a thumb to this video on YouTube, and please, 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 we would ask you to subscribe to this channel. That means a lot. Now, if you really do like what we do on this channel, I would humbly ask you to click on my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, military history, books on history, fun stuff like that. I even put up some of my lectures on that channel. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe to that channel as well. And again, if you do really like the content here on The Discriminating Gamer, I would humbly ask you to click on the Super Thanks button and leave a tip. I told my contractor that I didn't want any carpeting on my steps. He gave me a blank stare. Players take on the roles of either Japanese naval aviators or American naval aviators.